By the time you watch this video, there's a good chance that the brand new inscriptions for Pincer 2 are going to be in Rise of Kingdoms. So today we need to talk about if the special inscriptions are worth converting to, or if they're worth picking up if you've got the correct currency. Because if the special inscriptions are not worth it, then this could be a super costly mistake for your account at a time where we know Delta 2 is coming in just 3 months, and you don't want to make big mistakes like that at a time like this unless you are swimming in conversion stones, which honestly I don't know a single person that is. So this video is going to be important, but before we jump in, of course, what's going on, guys? Cheers. Now before we begin, if you guys appreciate guide videos that help you avoid mistakes in Rise of Kingdoms, please consider leaving a thumbs up down below. You have no idea how much that helps a video like this. With that being said, let's jump right in here, and what we're going to do in this video is literally just compare side by side each of the special inscriptions for Pincer 2 versus the Pincer 1 counterpart, and we're going to compare the difference to see if it's actually worth upgrading. Because remember, upgrading a special inscription, or I should say converting a special inscription, costs 10 conversion stones, and that is extremely expensive. And so if you're going to convert, you want to make sure that those upgrades are actually worth it. Otherwise you're better off saving them for something that could be better coming down the pipeline. Now we know Delta 2 should be landing sometime in November. I would say probably at the end of November is my best guess, and then there won't be a new wedge, pincer, or delta formation update throughout all of 2027 according to the developers. So once these new formations come out throughout the rest of this year, that's going to be it, and you will have an entire year to catch up on the stuff that you might have missed when it first drops, including Pincer 2. Okay, so what that means is, now that we know the release schedule, then unless the upgrade is obvious, you might want to just wait a couple of months, save those conversion stones in case something better is right around the corner. Now with that being said, I will say, just to save you guys some time, okay, I know you guys sometimes don't like it when I'm super long-winded. If you're watching this video as a rally or garrison lead, you should upgrade all of your special inscriptions. It's just that simple. Unfortunately, that is the case for Pincer 2. All of them seem to be categorically better in a rally garrison scenario, and if you are a rally garrison leader, you probably want the best of the best at all times. Now I know that's not a super scientific piece of advice, but it is kind of the reality, and that almost never changes in Rise of Kingdoms, right? If you're a rally garrison leader, expect to have a rally garrison level account, and that will require the best of the best. Okay, so with that being said, let's start with the emblem here, and this kind of paints my point really well, especially for rally garrison. This is just better, right? I mean, like, what, there is no debate here. The Tidebreaker special inscription on Pincer 2 is simply better point for point than the Thundering special inscription that was on Pincer 1. Okay, you can see that off on the side over here. Really, there's nothing to discuss here for rally garrison. Yes, you should upgrade because it's just better, end of story. However, for open field, if you're an open field player, is this conversion actually worth 10 conversion stones? And I would say the answer is probably not. Now obviously it's better, right? I mean, there is no debate there, it's actually better, but we're talking about going from a 10% boost to a 12.5% boost, and that's not nothing, because I mean, it's a 25% increase. I mean, it's basic math, right? It's a 25% jump in the value of that boost, and boosts are multiplicative as opposed to bonuses in Rise of Kingdoms. I've made a video on that, check it out on the channel to see why boosts are actually better than bonuses. Okay, but despite all of that being true, going from a 10% boost to a 12.5% boost for 10 conversion stones is not a conversion that I would be willing to make on day one of Pincer 2 dropping, right? I mean, this is one of those things where if you have extra conversion stones laying around, you don't know what to do with them, then this is a very safe upgrade because it is just better. However, I think there are better places that you can probably use 10 conversion stones, especially with Delta 2 coming down the pipeline in just a couple of months. So that's kind of my read on the emblem here. Now, for most of you watching, you probably don't have the emblem. This is arguably the hardest one to get. A lot of people are working towards this with their pity, either that or the instrument, which we'll talk about in just a second. But that's my kind of TLDR read on the instrument here. If you are an open field player and you don't have a ton of conversion stones, I don't think that this is is worth it, at least on day one. Wait until Delta 2 comes out, see if it's worth the conversion stones for Delta 2. If Delta 2 is not very good and if you got extra conversion stones, this is a safe bet. If you're a rally garrison leader, you're gonna need this. There's no way around that. Next, let's talk about the flag. And once again, rally garrison players, you're gonna need to upgrade. Okay, and I'm just gonna save you the rest of this video. If you're wondering, for rally garrison, yes, you should upgrade. Okay, if I didn't make that abundantly clear already. But for open field, is it worth upgrading from airtight to the bulwark special inscription? Now, we talked about this in my last video, but basically bulwark says that you're gaining 2% all damage resistance and 3% combo attack damage resistance, whereas with airtight it's just the 5% combo attack. Okay, so bulwark obviously slightly better there because it's part of it is all damage and that includes combo damage. But let's keep reading for the rest of the special inscription. For bulwark, it says whenever the wielder's troop takes basic attack damage, it has a 50% chance to take 10% less damage and deal 20% more smite damage for 3 seconds with a 5-second cooldown. Okay, now I want to be very clear here. I think the wording for this special inscription is very intentional. Okay, now it's also possible that the wording could just be wrong. There could be a translation error. Okay, and we'll have to wait and see when this comes in the game with a little bit of testing. But it says whenever the wielder's troop takes basic attack damage, this does not say normal attack damage, and it does not say when the wielder's troop receives or takes a basic attack. It is very explicit. It is basic attack damage, which is not combo attack damage. Okay, combo attack damage scales off of normal damage, but combo damage itself is a damage type, and when you take combo damage, you're not taking basic attack damage, you're taking combo attack damage. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. I know that it's a little bit confusing because normal attack damage is the scalar. That is what combo attack damage scales off of, right? It also scales off of bonuses to combo attack damage, right? So it's a little confusing, but basic attack damage is, as far as the wording is concerned, specifically the damage you take from basic attacks. It's not that you took a basic attack, it's when you take damage from a basic attack. Okay, I think they chose those words very specifically, and what that means is this will only trigger if you are being hit by basic attacks, not if you're being hit by AoE, not if you're being hit by combo damage, smite damage, whatever the case is. This, I believe, according to the wording, will only trigger if you take basic attack damage. Now, if you compare that to airtight, right, the second part of airtight says whenever their troop deals smite damage, their troop takes 10% less damage for the next 3 seconds with a 5-second cooldown. Both of them have a 5-second cooldown. Okay, now the difference is, of course, with bulwark, you have to be taking basic attack damage, which means somebody has to be hitting you. Okay, now what do you do when somebody is attacking your army, right? Oftentimes, and not all the time, it depends on the scenario, it depends on the enemy, it depends on the engagement, it depends on the zone. Okay, but a lot of times when you're being targeted, you're probably going to retreat shortly after that, right? And so in a scenario where the condition to trigger this will also be the condition with which you're retreating from battle, that is definitely a point against bulwark for open field PvP. Now, when it comes to rally garrison, obviously this is the winner, right? It's just objectively better. This is what you're going to get. But for open field, I think there is a case to be made for airtight. Now, which is better? Let me just be clear. Which one's better for open field? Bulwark is better. Okay, the question is not which is better. The question is which one is worth 10 conversion stones for the average open field player, right? That's the question we're answering in this video. And do I think you get a meaningful bump from airtight to bulwark? I think it's a little bit of a gray area, and it's not always a slam dunk yes. Now, again, is the buff here better objectively, right? It's objectively better. It's literally the same buff, but with the addition of 20% more smite damage for 30 seconds, right? Like, it's literally just better, but the condition with which you get the buff changes. And with airtight, this is whenever you deal smite damage, you take 10% less damage for the next 3 seconds. So that will trigger off of your own army's activity, right? You could be hitting somebody, and even if they're not hitting you back, they're running away, you proc Liuche's smite damage hit, right? And now you're taking 10% less damage. Now, the counter argument to that is, okay, well, if you're hitting somebody who's running away from you, you don't need to take 10% less damage, right? So that is definitely true as well. Most of the time you're not hitting somebody running away though, right? So you're oftentimes in a murder ball exchange, and there's AoE happening around you, and taking less damage there is really nice. Okay, so really when it comes down to it, is bulwark better for rally garrison? Yes. Is it better for open field? Probably. Is it worth 10 conversion stones, knowing that the condition for triggering the better buff is a worse trigger, in my opinion, right? I would much rather trigger things off of my own smite damage than trigger things off of taking basic attacks, right? I don't want to take basic attacks. This is like the entire argument that I use when people ask me why I don't use hold the line, even though 42% of governors use it, right? The answer is because I don't want to be getting hit by basic attacks, right? Now I know bulwark isn't off of basic attacks, but basic attack damage, but you get my point. The goal is to avoid the thing that would trigger the better buff, okay? And so that's why, and maybe I'm kind of rambling a little too much with this, and hopefully you guys understand where I'm coming from. Just because this is better doesn't mean it's worth 10 conversion stones. Okay, with that being said, let's move on to the instrument and compare Demolisher from Pincer 1 to Cleaver on Pincer 2. Now Cleaver says the wielder's troop gains 7% boost to smite damage and Demolisher is 5%. Okay, so out of the gate, once again, objectively better for Pincer 2. The second part of that says for Cleaver, when dealing smite damage, if the total damage factor for smite damage dealt during this turn is greater than 2000, so not the individual hit, but all smite damage you deal that turn, so whether it's AoE damage, whether it's an active skill plus an instant proc from Liu Che skill or something like that, all the different ways that you could proc smite damage, all of that adds up on this single turn, right? If it's over 2000, then you trigger the following. For every 200 damage factor exceeding 2000, the wielder's troop ignores 5% of the target troop's health when dealing smite damage for 5 seconds. Okay, so this is very, very intentional. You're only ignoring the target's health, okay, and it's only for smite damage dealt. So it's not like your normal attacks are going to ignore their health. It's not like your combo attack damage on Liu Che's expertise is going to ignore the enemy troops health, right? None of that is true. It's only your smite damage that will ignore the target's health stat. At the same time, you gain 2% rage gain speed, and this can stack up to 5 times. Its duration resets whenever it gains another stack, okay? And you're only going to gain stacks over 2000 smite damage dealt. But of course, the math works out such that if this stacks 5 times, that means that you can ignore up to 25% of the enemy troops health, and you get up to 10% rage gain speed. Now, if you compare that to Demolisher, it might seem like these things are pretty similar in effectiveness, right? Demolisher is talking about ignoring enemy defense rather than health, but it says you have a 75% chance to ignore 50% of the target's defense. I said in my last video that this averages out to be approximately 37.5% enemy defense ignored, right? Because 25% of the time you won't ignore anything, 75% of the time you ignore 50, so on average it's 37.5% defense, right? And so you might think, okay, well, the comparison here is, would you rather ignore 37.5% enemy defense, or would you rather ignore 25% enemy health and gain 10% rage gain speed, right? Which one of those is better? Let me finish reading Demolisher here for a second though. This effect can trigger up to 5 times in a single turn before entering cooldown. If it only triggers once, you gain 100 rage, 10-second cooldown, okay? And the biggest difference that I want to point out here between Cleaver and Demolisher isn't the difference between health versus defense. The difference is the cooldown. The cooldown on Demolisher is absolutely massive. A 10-second cooldown is, I don't know of any cooldown longer in Rise of Kingdoms, right? Cooldowns go between like 3 seconds or 0 seconds all the way up to 10 seconds. So this is the longest cooldown that we could possibly see on a buff or debuff or anything like that. That matters a ton. That matters a ton, and I don't think people are acknowledging that enough when they're comparing these two special inscriptions. So yes, Demolisher super strong, and it's ignoring more defense than Cleaver is ignoring health, right? And you could argue about the math there. Perhaps you would rather ignore more enemy defense, right? But think about it like this: Demolisher can be triggered whenever you deal smite damage. So let's say you trigger Demolisher off of an instant proc smite damage from Liu Che. Well, okay, now you've entered 10-second cooldown, you miss the timing for your active skill, right? Whereas with Cleaver, the instant proc from Liu Che will not trigger the actual debuff, right? Or I should say the buff on yourself that ignores the enemy health. But anytime that you exceed that 2000 total, it will turn this on, and it stays on for 5 seconds, okay? And so in that window, then if you trigger Liu Che's instant proc smite damage, then you still get the benefit of this, right? And so I really just want to draw the attention there there to, yes, it's easier to trigger Demolisher and you might prefer the higher percent defense ignored, but I think you're going to get more value out of Cleaver strictly because you're going to turn this on when it matters the most, right? Which is when you cast those big active skills, and there's 0 cooldown here. And I really want to drive that home. There is no listed cooldown on Cleaver. Okay, so every single time, if your rage cycle is ramping and ramping and ramping, which you're gonna do more of with rage gain speed, by the way. Okay, so you put this on Sun Tzu Prime and boom, there you go. As you cast your active skills faster and faster and faster, this will always trigger. It will not be on cooldown ever because there is no cooldown, right? It's just a matter of, is it on or off? And if it's not on, then it's just a matter of whenever you cast your active skill again, you're going to trigger this once again. Whereas with Demolisher, there's a chance that you actually miss the timing there. So in this case, you know, what is the answer, right? Is it worth upgrading 10 conversion stones to Cleaver? I think it might be. Now, of course, we should wait for testing, right? And I don't really know how to even test this because in duels, obviously that's not going to be exactly perfect compared to real world fighting. But in my opinion, you know, first of all, the boost is just better, right? Like let's not ignore this top part. This boost is just better. And unlike the emblem, which went from 10 to 12.5%, which was a 25% change, we see this is actually a 40% change for the same conversion stones. But there's a lot more that's being done here with Tiger Tally Horn, and that's why I wanted to point out, like, yes, the emblem is the safest upgrade because it's objectively better, but in either instance, you know, if you're going to go from 10 to 12.5 or you're going to go from 5 to 7, well, the percent change is just better here, and you get all this extra stuff on the bottom, right? So that's why I think this is probably a better use of 10 conversion stones than something like the emblem, because there's a lot more going on. So again, I think we should wait for testing for open field outcomes, but I would say Cleaver is probably a safer conversion than anything we've talked about so far in this video, right? Because again, it's objectively a higher boost and there's no cooldown listed. So you're always going to have this occurring on every active skill for every smite damage commander, right? And I think that matters a lot. Whereas with Demolisher, you know, your Sun Tzu cast is active skill, and let's say you do get the benefit of that, great, you only hit one target, now you gain 100 rage, now you have a 10-second cooldown. So, you know, there's the difference there. Now your Liu Che doesn't get the benefit of Demolisher, but he would get the benefit of Cleaver, right? And so that's the point that I'm trying to make here. I think Cleaver is definitely better. All right, now the final special inscription we have to talk about is Toppler versus Dominate, and this is for the scroll, and this is the one that most players probably have on their account because you can get Toppler from the KVK shop, and Dominate is going to be the one that enters the KVK shop, and so you will be able to get your hands on this at some point as long as your KVK opens after this lands in the game. Okay, let's see what Dominate does. Wielder's Troop gains 7% boost to smite damage, and of course Toppler gives you a 5% boost. So once again, we see objectively a massive percent change, a massive increase from 5 to 7, definitely better out of the gate. Okay, next, Dominate says when dealing smite damage, if the hit troop has more than 50% units remaining, the wielder's troop deals 20% more smite damage to it for 3 seconds. If not, the wielder's troop gains a 30% bonus to this instance of smite damage dealt. This effect can trigger up to 5 times with a 3-second cooldown. On the other hand, Toppler says whenever you deal smite damage, the target troop takes 20% increased smite damage for the next 3 seconds. This effect can trigger 5 times in a second before entering cooldown with a 5-second cooldown. Okay, so a couple of things to unpack here. First of all, we're comparing you dealing damage with your army versus Toppler gives you a debuff to the target, and so any smite damage dealt to that target is going to be amplified by 20% as a result of that. And so really we're not comparing apples to apples here. Okay, but the question is, which one's better, right? And once again, Rally Garrison, yes, upgrade to Dominate, open and shut case. There's really nothing else to say here, right? Unless like you're going to be swarming down a flag or a rally, you know, you're going to want Dominate, right? For that one-on-one exchange, this is just better, especially because as rallies and as garrison exchanges go on longer and longer, most of the time the hit troop is going to have less than 50% units remaining. It's been a long time since I looked this up, but I'm almost certain that the game, when it comes to things like this, it actually factors in all of the healthy troops, slightly wounded troops, and severely wounded troops in that engagement, which is why YSS was so powerful with his third skill, because it says if their troop has less than 50% units remaining, it deals 20% more damage, and you could basically have this up all the time. Even if the flag or the pass was full, you would still get this all the time because it was still factoring in total troop count, and that includes all the slightly wounded units and everything like that in the pass. Okay, so I might be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure that's how this is going to work. It just works in reverse, right? So the hit troop is almost certainly going to have less than 50% units remaining in a rally garrison scenario, in which case you're always going to get that 30% bonus, which is why this is just better for a rally garrison. That's pretty much how I'm looking at this. But the question is, you know, is it better to buff your army or is it better to debuff the enemy army, right? Well, usually the debuff scales better, right? I mean, it just is what it is. If you inflict the toppler debuff to the enemy, then everyone hitting them with smite damage benefits from that. And so in big open field fights, that's going to help out the murder ball a lot more, right? And just to be clear, it is a debuff. Here we could see I hit this barbarian, active skill from Sun Tzu goes off. Turn 8, you'll see that the barbarian's smite damage received was increased by 20% due to the toppler effect. Okay, they take 20% increased smite damage. So vulnerable vitals appears to be a debuff on the target on the barbarian side, and so from a scalability perspective, toppler is actually better, right? But for your individual army, I would say dominate is better, and there's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, like I said, the top line, it's just the raw damage is better, right? Second off, there is, and we have to pay attention to this again, this is so critical, the cooldown is much better here for dominate than it is for toppler, right? We're talking about a 5-second cooldown on toppler versus a 3-second cooldown on dominate. So with that shorter cooldown, you're just going to trigger dominate more. But ultimately, my point is here, okay, yes, toppler scales better in the open field, right? But dominate is going to trigger more, and it's literally just stronger when it comes to the 7% boost, right? So what's the play here? Well, if you only have one toppler on your account, that's where I'm not sure what the best advice actually is, frankly. We'll probably have to wait for testing, and if you want to play it safe, I would wait till Delta 2 comes out just to see what that actually looks like. But I would be willing to bet with the higher boost to smite damage and with the shorter cooldown, you're probably going to prefer having dominate, right? But it's a gray area. It could go either way. It just depends on, do you value more your single army performing better, or do you want the entire murder ball to perform slightly better? And that's really the difference between dominate versus toppler. If you've got two toppler right now, then I would say almost certainly you want to convert one of them, right? You definitely, if you've got two toppler, you probably want at least one dominate, right? So you would convert your best army, convert that to dominate, and then keep toppler on the other. And the way that I would do this would be your Sun Tzu army gets dominate, and then your Bai Chi army gets toppler, right? Because toppler is AoE debuff. It can be triggered up to 5 times in a single turn, and the target takes 20% increased smite damage for 3 seconds, right? So that's kind of how I'm thinking about this, right? So if you're in that camp like myself who has 2 toppler, I'm definitely on day 1 going to be converting at least one of these, strictly because it's a bigger boost and because it's got a shorter cooldown. So even though it's not as scalable, it's going to trigger more, and I think that might offset the difference there, and then I still keep one toppler on my other army, so I still get the benefit of that. If you only have one toppler, then you just have to ask yourself, do you prefer your single march performing better, or do you want to be more of a team player? If you want to be a team player, keep your toppler. If you want your single march to perform a little bit better, I would say go with dominate. But of course, if you want to play it safe, you could just wait for Delta 2 to come out and see if that's any good. If it sucks, then you can use your conversion stones here, or like I said, wait for actual in-game testing to conclusively determine which is actually better. Just don't expect that on day 1, right? I mean, even if we do duels, I don't think we're necessarily going to know exactly which is better. We might get a good idea, but I wouldn't expect to have a conclusive answer in the first 48 hours. Now, just to recap here, in case you're confused, because I spent a long time rambling, okay, the emblem is a safe upgrade, but it's probably not a priority if all you are doing is field fighting. There's probably better uses for your 10 conversion stones. If there isn't, and you've already upgraded everything, then okay, go ahead and do that. It's objectively better. The flag, once again, is definitely an upgrade for rally garrison, and it's probably a minor upgrade for your open field march, but I don't know if it is necessarily worth 10 conversion stones unless, once again, you've got tons of conversion stones and you don't know what to do with them. So again, is it objectively better? Probably. Is it worth 10 conversion stones on day 1 before we know if Delta 2 is any good? Probably not. The instrument, I would say, is probably better, almost certainly, because of the fact that there is just 0 cooldown and it's a higher boost to smite damage dealt, and this will always be around for every active skill that you deal, which is not necessarily the case for the demolisher effect on Pincer 1 because of that 10-second cooldown. So this upgrade is probably worth it as an open field player, and the scroll is the one that is a little bit up in the air. Okay, we've got 2 no's, a yes, and then a maybe. The scroll is the maybe for me. I would say it's probably better. And if you've got 2 topplers, then you definitely want at least 1 dominate. I would say you want at least 1 conversion. So on day 1 for Pincer 2, what my upgrades might look like would be something like converting 1 toppler to dominate, keeping the other toppler the same, converting my instrument, if I had one, converting my demolisher to my cleaver, and then just leaving airtight and thundering alone. I would probably do that, and then I would wait for Delta 2 to come out, right? And so I would be using 10 or 20 conversion stones for one of my armies. The second infantry army only has toppler. I'm going to keep that. If I had 2 demolishers on my account, I would probably upgrade both of them, but I would only upgrade the second one after we saw Delta 2. Okay, so the most number of conversion stones that I would spend on day 1 of Pincer 2 dropping is probably 20, right? Convert 1 toppler, convert 1 demolisher, and then if you've got airtight and thundering, just keep those as they are. And then on your second march, if you have toppler, I would keep that, and if you have demolisher, I'd probably keep that as well, at least until we see Delta 2. Once Delta 2 comes around, then you can make the decision of, okay, do you use the rest of your conversion stones on Delta 2, or do we come back and we start looking at things like airtight and thundering, and we start thinking about, okay, can we just maybe just get that guaranteed upgrade for thundering, bring it to 12.5, right? But that's not the decision that I would make on day 1 of Pincer 2 dropping, and those are just my thoughts and opinions. Hopefully this helps you guys. I wanted to get this video out before Pincer 2 actually landed in the game, so that way you guys kind of have an idea as to where my head is at for the average open field player. Right now, the average open field player probably doesn't have all 4 special inscriptions, so maybe only part of this video was applicable to you, but either way, I wanted to get this video out before it drops so that way I could caution you guys and say, look, some of these things, while they are objectively better, they might not be worth 10 conversion stones, since we know another formation is coming down the pipeline in just 3 months. You might want to hold off. That could be the better play, but let me know in the comment section below what you guys think about these special inscriptions. Am I wrong about this? Should people be converting all of their special inscriptions on day 1? Let me know in the comment section below. While you're down there, drop a thumbs up on the video. It really helps out the channel a ton, and consider subscribing to the channel. You might think you're sub, but you're actually not. Double check down below. And with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. This has been Omniarch. I'll talk to you guys again soon. Peace.